Visual Basic has a lot of enhancements to code editing. One of these that we talked about briefly was the My object. Earlier, we used the insert snippet to insert a snippet for the My object. Besides that one snippet, the My object has a lot of other objects that you might want to know. Specifically, the purpose of the My object is to avoid you having to dig down deep into a namespace. The Visual Studio engineers have noticed there were several properties and methods that were accessed quite frequently. It made sense to keep them buried where they were. For example, the file system should be under the computer settings. However, instead of having it deep within the namespaces, we decided to bubble them up into the My object. So here, you'll find commonly used properties and methods inside the .NET framework. Specifically, you have user, application, computer, resources, forms, web services, and settings. The user object contains information about the user that's currently logged into the application. Here you can find out the security context, what role the user is in, whether they're authenticated or not. In the application object, you'll find objects referring to the application, meaning the application that you're running right now. So you can get information about the metadata, such as the version of the application or the title. This is useful if you want to query to find out whether the user is using an older version of your application. That way, you can provide backwards compatibility between various versions of your application. The computer object allows you to navigate through properties and settings on that local machine. For example, the computer object allows you to read and write registry settings as well as file system settings. Typically, the file system settings are buried within the system.io namespace. By using the My object, you can directly go right into the file system without having to declare or drill down deep into the system.io namespace. Also under Computer is the ability to manage audio files, the clipboard, as well as the computer clock. In the resources, this is where you manage images and icons, which we'll be doing in the next chapter. Next, you have the forms. These are forms that belong to the specific project. You can navigate in and out of these by looking at the form logs, looking at the settings for a particular form, or examining requests and responses if you're using web forms. With web services, this allows you to iterate directly into web references that you have referenced in your project. And lastly, settings. Settings are quite useful, as you saw earlier in this series, for working with different connection settings or profile settings for your user.